Sham Sharadava Nalalidaloka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalidaloka Tranaya Karunya Ganaganatam Prapta Sakalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Prapta Sakalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Mahaprabhu ki Tananvita Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasuraseno Gita Vaditra Madhyam Romancha Kampasu Taranga Bhaju Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Romancha Kampasu Taranga Bhaju Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Niramajanado Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Niramajanado Juktasya Bhaktamsya Neyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Juktasya Bhaktamsya Neyunjatopi Charanara Vrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasado Sattvanatriptan Hari Bhakta Sangam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasado Sattvanatriptan Kritva eva trupti Vajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Kritva eva trupti Vajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanara Shiradikama Tavayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupa Namna Shiradikama Tavayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupa Namna Pratikshanasa Dhanalolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Pratikshana Ne kunja yuno rati kelisi jai Jayali bher jukti apekshaniya Ne kunja yuno Tatrati daksha Ativalabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Tatrati daksha Sakshadharitvena Samasta Shastrin Ruktastatava Vyataiva Sadhavi Sakshadharitvena Kintu Pravarja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Garashi Charanara Vrindam Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Dayam Stovam Tasya Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Garashi Charanara Vrindam Dayam Stovam Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Garashi Vande Garashi Charanara Vrindam Vande Garashi Charanara Vrindam Charanara Vrindam Vande Garashi Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatarisha Tarine Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vachatarisata Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Krishna Chaitanya Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hariyaraye Namah Krishna Yadavaye Namah. Jadavaye Madhavaya Keshavaye Namah. Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan. Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita. Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna. Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Shri Radha, Nila Madhava Radha, Nila Madhava Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladev, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Pramanande. Jai Vishnu Paraparamita Prabhajakaacharya, Ashtottara Sarasishya Maharishi Divine Grace, Abhocharvina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki. ISKCON Pratishta Viviti Samstabhakacharya Vaishnava Siramani Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patita Udhar ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhakta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Satguru Swami Prabhu ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ji ki jai. Ananta Kuch Vaishnava Vrindi ki jai. Prem se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrind ki jai. Jai Param Dayal Se Nityananda Prabhu ki jai. Prema Nama Sankirtane Ka Janaka Prema Purushottama Shri Sachinandan Shman Gauranga Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Guru Hari Mavanaya Avatar ki jai. Golokera Pramadhana Harinam Sankirtan Jaga ki jai. Jugadharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki jai. Prihatmitanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopagopna Radhakun Samakunda Giriraj Govardhan ki jai. Shri Brajapim Vrindavan Mathurudham ki jai. The Lordship Shri Radha Nila Madhava ki jai. Shri Mayapurna Padvip Ekar Chakradam ki jai. Parama Karuna Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai. Shri Purushottama Kitra Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Smaspadra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan ki jai. Bhakti Sarva Vigna Vinashana Karishangari Bhagavan ki jai. Jai Sitaram Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman ji ki jai. Jaganga Mai Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulsi Maharani Vrindi Devi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Mati Radharani ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaurari Pramanande Haribo. All glories to the assembly bodies. All glories to the assembly bodies. All glories to the assembly bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru Shri Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya Praladadadaine Praladadadaine Hiranyakasipurvakshaha Shilatanka nakhalaye शिलाटंका न खालाई इतो नरसिंह परतो नरसिंह इतो नरसिंह परतो नरसिंह येतो येतो यामिततो नरसिंह
जतो जतो यामिततो नरसिंह
महे नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह बहे नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे तव करकमलवरे नाकामद्भुतशृङ्गा दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गा केशवद्रिता नरारिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवद्रिता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
जय केशवद्रिता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
जय नरसिंह दे जय नरसिंह दे जय नरसिंह दे जय नरसिंह दे
जय नृसिंह रे नृसिंह रे जय नृसिंह रे जय नृसिंह रे
जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज
जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद
जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद
जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद
जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव
जय जय गुरुदेव गुरुदेव गुरुदेव
जय जय गुरुदेव। श्री भक्ति विघ्न विनाश का श्री लक्ष्मी नरसिंह देव भगवान की जय। श्री प्रहलाद महाराज की
जय। Shri Vrindaye Tulasi Devai Priyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Vrindaye Tulasi Devai Priyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Vrindaye Tulasi Devai Priyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki Jai.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha
Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Ei Abhilashi
Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Ei Abhilashi
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha
Je Tumhara Sharan Loe Tara Vancha Purna Hoye
Tumhara Sharan lo Tara Vancha Purna
Kripa Kori Koro Tare Vrindavan Vasi
Kripa Kari Karatare
Muraiya Bilas Bilas Kunj Diyo Ba Nayane Haribo Sada Jugal Ruparasi Ei nivedana dharo sakhiranu gata koro Seva adhikara diye koro nij dasi Dina Krishna dase koi ei je na mora hoye Shri Radha Govinda preme sada jena bhasi श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जिन भासी
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जिन भासी।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्माहत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
कानि कानि सा पापानि ब्रह्माहत्यानि कानि सा तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
यानि क्यानि च पापानि ब्रह्माहत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
कानि कानि सा पापानि ब्रह्माहत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
जयो तुलसी महारानी जयो तुलसी महारानी जयो तुलसी महारानी जयो तुलसी महारानी
Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani.
जयो वृंदा देवी जयो वृंदा देवी जयो वृंदा देवी जयो वृंदा देवी
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल
Jai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
वृंदा देवी की जय।
Shri Vrindayai Tulasi Devai, Priyayai Kesava Satya, Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi, Shatavatai Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai, Priyayai Kesava Satya, Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi, Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai, Priyayai Kesava Satya, Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavataya Namo Namaha. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Brinda Devi Ki Jai. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you, his wish is fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me residence of the groves of Shri Vrindavan town. Thus within my vision, I behold beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of the dances of Raj. Please give me the privilege of personal service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always stay in the love of Shri Radha and Gold. Shri Mati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Krishna Ki Jai. Sadhanam. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Ki Jai. Namo Mahavadhanaya Krishna Prema Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Gaur. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtana. His cleanses the heart of all their dust accumulated for years, and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment, the prime benediction of humanity at large, because his prayers will raise the benediction moon. It is the life of transcendental knowledge, which increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and enables us to fully test the nectar for which we always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds, millions of names like Krishna and Govind. In these transcendental names, you have invested your transcendental energies. There is no even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. Once we chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, think oneself lower and so on the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige. You should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, Not do I want any number of followers. I only want your cousin to watch your service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Dear Samurad, I am following this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, O with my eyes will be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name. O with my eyes, O with air has my body stand on end for the station of your holy name. O Govinda, feeling your separation, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world with your absence. I know no one but Krishna, my Lord, and he should remain so even if sun doesn't work in grace and grace, or makes me broken hearted by not being present before me. He's completely free to do anything and everything, but he's always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Shri Shikastakam Ki Jai. Namo Mahaprabhu. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that must be avoided. They are as follows. 1. Blaspheme, void is dedicated life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. Consider the names of demigods and Lord Shiva and Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3. Disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. Blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures of the sons of Vedic version. 5. Consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to the imagination. 6. To give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities and strength to chant the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna is one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which offer the Vedas as spiritual activity karma kanda. 9. To strike the godless person by the glories of holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It also an offense to pretend to word chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our respectful wishes unto all the Vaishnavas devoted to the Lord. They are just like desire trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen and conditioned souls.
Vanchakalpa
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadhyasya yata vayaditaratascha swavigyaswarat Tene Brahma Rudaya Adikavaye Mujanti Suraya Tejo Parimridan Jata Vinamayo Jatra Krishna Gurmrasya Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading Krishna, the Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
My respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute
And the
truth.
primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested
The
universe.
creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universe.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all
He is
manifestations.
directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he's independent because there's no other cause beyond
And
him.
he is independent because there's no other cause beyond
It
him.
is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahmaji,
It is he only who first imparted Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahma.
the original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him have been the great sages and demigods are placed.
As
into
one is
illusion.
bewildered by the illusory representation
As one is bewildered by the illusory
of water seen on
representation
fire or land seen on water,
The waters and the five lands and water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universes.
temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature,
Temporarily manifested by the reactions of three modes.
appear
of nature.
factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are
I
unreal.
therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord
who
Shri
is
Krishna,
eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternally existent in the transcendent,
which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute
I
truth.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute.
Dharma projita kaitravutra,
Dharma prajita kaitava.
paramo nirmatsranam satam,
Dharmo nirmasaranam satam.
vedyam vastavam atravastu,
Vedyam vastavam astavastu.
shivadam tapatrayon mulinam.
Shivadam taputrayo.
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamani Krite,
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni.
Kim Va Purer Ishwaraha, Sadyo Hridi Avarujitetra,
Sadyo Rudya Varidhyatitra.
Kriti Vihi Sususabhistakshanat.
Kriti Sushishubhistakya.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which material
This
motive.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest
This
truth,
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable that those bodies are fully pure in
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from the illusion for the welfare.
Such truth uproots the threefold mysteries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold
This
mysteries.
beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled with the great sage Vyasadeva
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
It's sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by this culture
the
of knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpaturor galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
sukumukad amrita dravya samyutam,
Sukamakar Mitra
pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam,
Pibata Bhagavatam Rasam.
muhur ahor askabu vibhavakaha.
Hora Hora Sika.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
Oh, excellent. Those who made relish Shema Bhagavatam.
the mature fruit of the desire to read Vedic literature.
The mature fruit, the desire for the Vedic glory.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
Emanated from the lips of Shishukadev Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more
Although
tasteful.
its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarine is all relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including the great soul.
Chintatam swakata Krishna,
Shrambatam Sakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Hridyantak Stohi Bhadrani,
Vidyantastu Hyavadra.
Vidunati Srihitsatam.
Vidunati Suritsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic
or to hear from
literatures,
him directly through the Bhagavad
or to
Gita,
hear from him directly through the
is
Bhagavad
itself
Gita.
righteous activity.
It is self-righteous.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
for one who hears about
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within
acts
everyone's
as a
heart.
best-wishing friend
Acts as the best
and
wishing
purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
purifies the body is constantly engaged in hearing.
Nastapresu abhadresu
Nasta Preshwa Bhadrishu.
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Seva.
bhagavati uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttama Sloke.
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
Bhakti Bhavati Nastiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, the word naturally develops his dormant transcendental.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the
and
devotees,
from the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service to the Lord.
Tadarajastumo bhava
Tadarajastamo Bhava.
kamalobhadayaschaye
Kamalobhadayasya.
cheta itarinabhidam
Chaitaitarana
stitvam
Vidam.
sattve prasidati.
Siddham Sattve Prasad.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of
and
ignorance.
thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
And this material lust and avarice are
Evam
diminished.
prasana manasu
Evam prasannamana
bhagavad bhakti yogataha
Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga
bhagavad tattva vijnanam
Bhagavad Tattva
mukta
Vijnana
sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sangha Sajaya.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When these impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional
and
service,
understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
Vidyate Hridaya Granthi
chidyante sarva samsaya,
Chidyante Sarva
siyante
Samsaya
jasya karmani,
Chiyante Sacha Karmani
yusta evat manishvare.
Drusta Evadmanishvari.
Thus Bhakti Yoga serves severs the hard knot of material affection,
Thus, the Bhakti Yoga severs the hardening of the material
and
affliction
enables one to come at once to the stage of the samsayam samagram,
and enables one to come at once to the stage of Assumption
understanding of the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
understanding the supreme absolute true personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna, from his devotees in Krishna
can one
consciousness,
understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Shri Guru Vastika prayers ki jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy.
The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean.
Just as a cloud pours water on the forest fire to extinguish it,
Just as the cloud pours water on the forest fire to extinguish it,
so the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world
so the spiritual master delivers the material afflicted world
by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence.
by extinguishing the blazing fire of material
I offer my
existence.
respectful obeisance to Lotus Feet as such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is the ocean of spiritual qualities.
Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments.
Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments.
The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
The spiritual master is gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Because he's relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind.
Because he's relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind.
Sometimes his hair stands on end.
Sometimes his hair stands on his end.
He feels quivering in his body,
He feels quivering in his body.
and tears flow from his eyes like waves.
And tears flowing from his eyes like
I offer
waves.
my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a
The
spiritual
spiritual
master.
master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna.
The spiritual master always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha.
He also engages his disciples in such worship.
He also engages disciples in such worship.
They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments,
They wear the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments,
clean their temple,
clean their temple,
and perform other similar worship of the Lord.
and perform other similar worship of the Lord.
For my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a
The
spiritual master.
spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food.
Spiritual master always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food.
Analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked.
Analyze that as which is licked, stewed, drink, and sucked.
When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada,
When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasad,
he is satisfied.
he is
I
satisfied.
offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava.
The spiritual master is eager and to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastime of Radhika
And their qualities, names, and forms.
and the qualities, names, and
The
forms.
spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment.
The spiritual master aspires to relish these in every
I
moment.
offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual.
The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis,
The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis,
who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan.
who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of
I offer my
Vrindavan.
most humble obeisance unto the Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord,
The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord
because he's the most confidential servitor of the Lord.
because he's the most confidential servitor of the Lord.
This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures
It's acknowledged in the revealed scriptures
and followed by all authorities.
and followed by all authorities.
Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Feet as such a spiritual master,
Therefore, I offer my humble obeisance unto the Lord of such spiritual master,
who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hari Krishna.
who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hari Krishna.
By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna.
By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna.
Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement.
Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement.
Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master.
Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master.
At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master.
At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus
Shri
feet
Brahma
of my
Samhita
spiritual
ki jai. Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadi Radhi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam.
Ishvara Parama Krishna Sakchit Ananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karana
Chintamani Prakalasatma Sukalpa Vriksha
Chintamani Prakarasadma Sukalpa Viksha
Laksavrite Susurabhirabhipalayantam
Lakya Viteshu Surabhir Abhipalayantam
Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambrama Sevyamanam
Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasim Brahmashivamanam
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Venum Kwananta Aravinda Dalayataksham
Venum Nantam Aravinda Dayalataksham
Parhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam
Paravatam Masita Buddha Sundaram
Kandarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham
Kandarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Alola Chandra Kalasadvanamalya Vansi
Alula Chandra Kalasat Vanamam Vyavamsi
Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam
Ranangadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam
Yamam Tribanga Lalitam Niyata Prakasam
Syamam Trubhanga Lalitam Niyata Prakasham
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Anyani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti
Angani Yasha Sakalindriya Vrittimanti
Pasyanti Panti Kalayanti Chiram Jaganti
Pasyanti Panti Kalayanti Chiram Jaganti
Ananda Chinmaya Sada Ujvala I'm sorry Ananda Chinmaya Sad Ujvala Vigrahasya
Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrasya
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam
Advaitam Achyutam Anandim Anantarupam
Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha
Adyam Purana Purusham Navajovanam Cha
Vedesu Durlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto
Vedeshu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhaktu
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Pantastu Koti Satavatsata Sampragamyo
Pantastu Koti Shatasvatsara Sampragamyo
Vayuratapi Manaso Munipungamanam
Vayoratapi Manaso Munipungavana
Sobhyasti Yat Prapadasim Yavichintya Tattve
Sopyasti Yat Prapadasim Vitinchyatatve
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Ekopya Sora Chayitum Jagadanda Kotim
Ekopya Sura Jajitum Jagananta Kotim
Yaschaktirasti Jagadanda Chayayadanta
Yakshakti Rasti Jagananda
Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam
Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Yad Bhava Bhavitadya Manajastataiva
Jad Bhava Bhavita Dhiyo Manujasta Thaiva
Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhushaha
Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusha
Taryameva Nigama Patitaistuvanti
Shuktir Yameva Nigama Patintastustanti
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2 Chapter 5 Verse number 16 Narayana Paro Yogo
Narayana Parayogo
Narayana Param Taba
Narayanam Param
Narayana Param Jnanam
Narayanam Param Jnanam
Narayana Paragati
Narayanam Param Gati
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. All different types of meditation or mysticism are means for realizing Narayana. All austerities are aimed at achieving Narayana. Culture of transcendental knowledge is for getting a glimpse of Narayana And ultimately, salvation is entering the kingdom of Narayana. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In meditation, there are two systems of yoga, namely Ashtanga Yoga and Sankhya Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga is practiced in concentrating the mind, releasing oneself from all engagements by regulative processes of meditation, concentration, sitting postures, blocking the movements of the internal circulation of air, etc. Sankhya Yoga is meant to distinguish the truth from ephemerals, but ultimately both the systems are meant for realizing the impersonal Brahman, which is but a partial representation of Narayana, the personality of Godhead. As we have explained before, the impersonal Brahman effulgence is only a part of the personality of Godhead. Impersonal Brahman is situated on the person of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as such, Brahman is the glorification of the personality of Godhead. This is confirmed both in Bhagavad Gita and in the Matsya Purana. Gati refers to the ultimate destination or the last word in liberation. Oneness with the impersonal Brahmajyoti is not ultimate liberation. Superior to that is the sublime association of the personality of Godhead in one of the innumerable spiritual planets in the Vaikuntha sky. Therefore, the conclusion is that Narayana, or the personality of Godhead, is the ultimate destination for all kinds of yoga systems, as well as all kinds of liberation. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All different types of meditation or mysticism are means for realizing Narayana. All austerities are aimed at achieving Narayana. Culture of transcendental knowledge is for getting a glimpse of Narayana, and ultimately salvation is entering the kingdom of Narayana. So this is the same two verses, yesterday and today, 15 and 16, are also were also spoken by Sukadeva Goswami. In the first canto, second chapter, 29th verse, where both verses are quoted together, and it says, so here it says Narayana Paro Yoga, but in the first canto, second chapter, verses 28 and 29, it says Vasudeva Para Veda, Vasudeva Para Makaha, Vasudeva Para Yoga, Vasudeva Para Kriya, Vasudeva Param Jnanam, Vasudeva Param Tapa, Vasudeva Paro Dharma, Vasudeva Paragati. Now we can ask a question. Why does he quote basically the same two verses, but in the first canto he says Vasudeva, and in the second canto he says Narayana? Well, as we just quoted from the first verse, the first canto, first chapter, first verse, it says, O my Lord Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth. So Krishna is the fountainhead of all the expansions. It begins with Lord Balaram. From Balaram comes the first Chaturvyuha, Vasudeva, and Pradumna, Aniruddha, Sankar's son, Vasudeva, Pradumna, Aniruddha, and then comes Lord Narayana, and then the second Chaturvyuha, and Sankar's son, Vasudeva, Pradumna, Aniruddha, and then from that second Chaturvyuha and Narayana are expanded the Vishnu incarnations. Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Kshirodakshay Vishnu, and Kshirodakshay Vishnu, from him expand all incarnations, such as Matsya avatar, and Narasingha avatar, and so forth. So that is, now, there's one Krishna and one Balaram, but from Balaram, as soon as Sankarsan, Vasudeva, Padumna, Aniruddha are expanded, there are millions of them. And they all have the same form as Narayana. And then from that comes Narayana. And there's millions, like I said, millions of forms of Narayana in the spiritual world. Millions, billions. An unlimited number, because there are unlimited number of spiritual planets in Vaikuntha, and eventually, in Vaikuntha. And then from that, the second Chaturvyuha is expanded, and then there's millions and billions of forms of Vishnu, of Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Kshirodakshay Vishnu. Kshirodakshay Vishnu is present in the heart of every living entity, in every universe, and there's billions and infinite number of material universes. And Kshirodakshay Vishnu is present in every atom of every universe. You see, so it's mind-boggling. All the expansions, but it says, Ite chamsak kalak pumsak Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indriyari Kulam Lokam Murdayanti Yuge Yuge. It says that Krishna is the fountainhead, or the source of all those expansions of the Lord. So that is the truth, and that's the first canto, third chapter, 28th verse. All of the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord, for Lord Shri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets whenever there is a disturbance created by the atheist. The Lord incarnates to protect the theist. So, in this particular verse, Iti Chamsak Kalak Pumsa is referring to the incarnations in the material world. But before that, Balaram is the first emanation from Krishna, and he is non-different than Krishna except that he's whitish and Krishna is dark colored. That's the only difference, and that's a minor difference. But Balaram has all the powers of Krishna, and then from Balaram the first Chaturvyuha, and then Narayana, then the second Chaturvyuha, and then the Vishnu incarnations like that. So anyone who claims that they're God is not only a complete nonsense, they're an embarrassment. They are disgusting because they don't understand what is God. You know, and they don't understand the powers that Krishna has. So we're learning in a very gradual way all the potencies of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they're unimaginably expansive and great. We have to expand our consciousness to try and get a little glimpse of the extent and infinite potencies of the Lord. So this is a very interesting subject, because once we understand how great the Lord is, we become a devotee. Right? You can't avoid it. But most people don't want to hear any of this because they're envious of the Lord. Like when you don't like someone, you don't want to hear anything about them. Right? So because most people are envious of the Lord, because they're trying to imitate the Lord as little lords in the material world by dominating and exploiting some little part of the material energy and a few people, or in the case of big despotic dictators and so forth, and with many people. But whatever they're trying to dominate, whether they're big despots or they are little despots, it's insignificant compared to the energies and powers of the Lord. So this desire to dominate, like Bezos or Gates or Larry Ellison, or politicians like Dirty Joe Biden or Mr. Trump or Putin or Mao Hitler or Stalin, all these, or Napoleon, all these nonsense people, they are not even mosquitoes compared to Krishna. See? But yet they're trying to imitate the Lord and dominating and exploiting. Just like now, Bezos and Amazon, when they have some big users of Amazon, they insist on owning a certain part of that company. Otherwise, they won't let them continue. They bully these companies to give them shares in their company because they're making so much money off of Amazon. So you see, it's all about control. People want to control. The rapist wants to control his victim, and the businessman wants to control and take over all the businesses in the world, and the politician wants to control a country and then other countries and then the whole world, right? So this, whether it's a little ant that wants to control a speck of sugar, or it's a despot dictator who wants to control millions of people in many, many countries, it's the same disease, and that is enviousness of God and the attempt to become a little God in some part of the material world. But like we said, there are millions of universes, billions of them. This is only one universe, the whole universe, not all, including all the galaxies, as much as we can see with the telescope, and then beyond that, the 7 coverings of the universe that we can't see, but which are 10 times greater than each other. So we have no concept of the breadth and extent of Krishna's powers, but we're learning slowly now, verse after verse, more and more about Krishna. So, therefore, this first chapter, first canto, second chapter, verse 28 and 29, is very similar to what we're reading today. But then again, in the first chapter, the first canto, 9th chapter, 18th verse, let's take a look at that. It says, Esavai Bhagavan Sakshat Adyo Narayana Pumam Mohayam Mayaya Lokam Gutas Charati Vishnisu. This Sri Krishna is no other than the inconceivable original personality of Godhead. He is the first Narayana, the supreme enjoyer, but he is moving amongst the descendants of King Vrishni, just like one of us, and he's bewildering us with his self-created energy. So, this is a very interesting verse spoken by Bhisma Pitamaha on his bed of arrows while he's explaining Raja Dharma to Yudhishthira Maharaj. Yudhishthira did not want to be the king. He was disgusted because so many people died in the battle of Kurukshetra, and his mother kept a secret, a terrible secret, that was that Karna was actually a brother. And when he found out all of this after the battle of Kurukshetra, after the terrible carnage of 640 million men dying in the battle in 18 days, you see how lethal the Vedic weapons were. They were arrows, but they were atomic arrows of the Maharati, fighters like Arjuna and Bhima and Bhisma and Dronacharya. They had atomic weapons at that time, but they were smart weapons. They could lance a Brahmastra, which is much more powerful than an atomic or nuclear bomb, but it would only kill certain people. But today, when they throw an atomic bomb, it kills everybody and everything, nature and everything. But that's not a smart bomb. That's a dumb bomb, right? The smart bomb kills specific persons, and it's invincible. Anyway, Bhismadev is explaining Raja Dharma, and the first thing you have to understand to become a king is to understand who's the real king. So he's saying, this Sri Krishna, who's standing right next to me right now, Krishna is there witnessing the demise of Bhisma Pitama, because Bhisma Pitama's death was glorious, because all the greatest sages in the universe, Narada Muni, Vyasadeva, and so forth, and all the devatas were present to see him die. Why? Because his death was glorious. This is the difference between a mundane person dying, which is a very unhappy event for the family and loved ones, and a pure devotee like Bhismadev, which is the most glorious event that all the greatest personalities in the universe come to witness. Because death is the most important moment of life. Because at that point, it'll be determined whether we go back to Godhead for eternal life, or we go back to the taking birth again in the 8,400,000 species and undergoing the gradual process of evolution of consciousness. There's not evolution of bodies. All the bodies were created in the beginning of creation. But they're like different houses, just like in Sammamish, you have different neighborhoods and different houses with different prices, right? So in each neighborhood, the pricing is different because they were built 20 years before, or 50 years before, or just 10 years before. And so now the newest houses they're building, at least they begin around $1.5 million. Whereas the houses they built 30, 40 years ago, they began at $200,000, right? You bought one of those, right? Yeah, but now, because of inflation, which is a false thing, you had to pay $600,000. Right? But when it was built, it was hardly $200,000, maybe $150,000, maybe $50,000. I remember I have an uncle in 1949. He bought a house in Menlo Park in California for $8,000. And before he died, the house was worth, I think, $15 million. The property was worth $15 million, I'd say. So it increased value tremendously. He only paid $8,000 in 1949. And by the 1990s and 2000, it was worth $15 million. So all this is false because it's the same house, right? Maybe he made some improvements in it, but it's the same house. But because of paper money based on gold standard, and then paper money not based on the gold standard, it's called fiat money. It's based on whatever confidence people have in it. That's what we have today. And although, because the United States has the most powerful army in the world, most people maintain their confidence. Of course, it's being lost now. Pretty soon it will be the yen, the Japanese yen, but it'll be the standard means of exchange. But anyway, but then they created the Bitcoin, which is artificial money. It's a funny money, right? So the Bitcoin goes up. You buy it for $1,000 when it starts, and it goes up to $100,000 per Bitcoin, right? And then it goes down sharply, loses half of its value or more. So it's going up and down because it's all based on confidence. If you can buy something with it, and you have faith that in the future, by collecting these Bitcoins, you can buy things with it, therefore it has some value, right? But then when people lose their confidence, all of a sudden, it sharply falls down again. And some of them have fall down to zero and then completely wiped out. So you see, this whole thing about money is false. It's an illusory thing. Sometimes it's worth this, and other times it's worth something else. Sometimes it loses its value completely. Like at the end of World War I, the German Deutschmark became so devalued that you had to use a wheelbarrow to carry hundreds and thousands of bills of Deutschmarks to buy just a piece of bread, just a loaf of bread. That's how much the inflation became. And because of that, Hitler was able to take over the country because the people were so desperate. Their money was worth basically nothing, So we see how we're being manipulated by the material energy. And of course, we read that verse a couple days ago, which is extremely important, in the 13th chapter. And I'm going to read it again because this is something most people have a lot of trouble understanding, even devotees. And it says here that okay, let's see. One second. Okay, so this is 13th chapter, 30th verse. It says, one who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and sees that the self does nothing, actually sees. That this is an amazing verse that most people would reject because they're completely an illusion. And in the purport, Prabhupada explains, this body is made of material nature under the direction of the Supersoul, and whatever activities are going on in respect to one's body are not his doing. Now, do you accept this? Whatever you're doing is not you that's doing it or causing it to be done. There's some other force forcing you to do all these things, working, eating, passing stool, sleeping, waking up again, working, eating, sleeping, all these things. You're being forced. It says, and whatever activities are going on in respect to one's body are not his doing. Whatever one is supposed to do, either for happiness or for distress, one is forced to do because of the bodily constitution. The self, however, is outside all these bodily activities. Another means your soul. This body is given according to one's past desires. To fulfill desires, one is given the body, with which he or she acts accordingly. Practically speaking, the body is a machine designed by the Supreme Lord to fulfill desires. Because of desires, one is put into difficult circumstances to suffer and to enjoy. This transcendental vision of the living entity, when developed, makes one separate from bodily activities. One who has such a vision is an actual seer. This is an amazing verse and purport, and it's the truth. But most people, I would say 99.9% of people, would reject it. Imagine telling Bezos, everything you're doing is not you. You're being forced to do it. So, are you crazy? He would not accept that. But yes, you're eating, you're sleeping, you're mating, you're defending. All those fundamental actions are forced on us by the body, which is under the control of the three modes of material nature. And how do you know it's under the control? When you get cancer, and after going through chemo, and after going through radiation therapy, and after going through so many blood tests and diagnostic techniques and things like that, they finally said, well, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, we can't do anything more for you. Just go home and die. And here's some opium or some other drug that you can take to sort of improve the quality of your suffering. That's what they tell you. They say, basically, they tell you, go home and die. We can't do anything else for you. We already burned your body with the chemo and the radiation, and nothing can help you. You have maybe 2 months to live or 1 month to live, and here are all the drugs you can take to sort of withstand the pain that you're going to feel. You see. So that is the sad state today. And at that point you realize man is not in control. The individual is not in control of the body, nor are all these big doctors and PhDs and scientists in control of nature. The nature is being controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if you violate the laws of God, eventually the reaction is a body that goes out of control, and you die. See? And then you have to take birth again and start all over, but not necessarily as a human being. It can be as a cockroach or a rat or a snake. And you have to go through the whole process of coming back to the human form of life with human consciousness. This is the reality. And everything else that they're saying, or they're writing books about, in 2050 we will solve the riddle of death, and old age and disease will be optional because we will have nanotechnology, or we'll make a robot that looks like you, exactly like you, and download your brain into it, and you'll live forever. Of course, unless Igor in Belarus hacks your computer, and then you end up in the junkyard. The whole thing is nonsense. And people are so crazy. All these intelligent people, they're talking about, well, yeah, I want my brain downloaded in software and then put into a robot that looks exactly like me. That's crazy. Or freeze me now, right before I die, and then unfreeze me in the future when you solve the riddle of death. And that costs, like I said, $200,000 a year. So only rich people can do it, because they're the dumbest of everybody. The richest people are the dumbest people, and they'll waste all their money being frozen. And by the way, if I freeze you right now, later on you thaw out, will you be dead or alive? You'll be dead. Of course you're dead. You're free, get frozen, you die. But they're so stupid that they have these factories now all over the world. Of course, everything stupid begins in California, and then it spreads all over the world. But dumber than that is everything that begins in India and is spread all over the world. It's even dumber than what's spread from California, because in India, in America, we manufacture a new model car, many of them every year. But in India, they manufacture a new Bhagavan every year. You see, so they're more advanced than the American stupidity, right? Anyway, this verse in the purport, Prabhupada says, this verse spoken by Bhisma Pitama, the Vedic system of acquiring knowledge is the deductive process. That means it's descending knowledge. The inductive process is ascending. That's why it's imperfect. Deductive process, when a spiritual deduction beginning from the assumption that this Sri Krishna is no other than the inconceivable original personality Godhead, that is called deductive knowledge. You begin with a absolute, incontrovertible truth, an a priori truth that Krishna is the Supreme Personality, and then you deduct from that. So therefore it descends. Whereas the scientist, he makes a guess. He thinks, well, if I eat meat, I can live forever. So that's the, what was the name? The Atkins diet. Atkins gave 50 years more to the hoax of the protein intoxication by meat. In other words, his idea was, you want to lose weight? Eat meat only. And with that protein, you'll begin to lose weight. Well, it works to a certain degree. And Atkins became very rich. At first, nobody believed him, but finally, they started believing him. Then he became very rich. He had a penthouse in Manhattan, and he had an office in a high-rise in Manhattan. And one day, he was walking from his penthouse to his office. It was wintertime. He slipped on some ice on the pavement, fell backwards, cracked his skull, and died. Right at his peak. Right? Why? Because he gave another 50 years to the meat industry in the United States. You know, the meat industry was going down, people were becoming vegetarians, and then Atkins comes in with his protein diet, and immediately the meat industry went up again for another 50 years. In other words, a new misconception entered into the minds, the fertile minds of stupid people, and they started believing Atkins, and so the meat sales went up again. Anyway, the first principle for a king is to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, he can't be a good king. He'll mess up the country because he'll make so many mistakes based on false assumptions. So it says the Vedic system of acquiring knowledge is a deductive process. The Vedic knowledge is received perfectly by disciplic succession from authorities. Such knowledge is never dogmatic, as ill-conceived by less intelligent persons. The mother is the authority to verify the identity of the father. She is the authority for such confidential knowledge. Therefore, authority is not dogmatic. In the Bhagavad Gita, this truth is confirmed in the 4th chapter, Bhagavad Gita 4.2. And the perfect system of learning is to receive it from authority. So Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, 2nd verse, Evam parampara praptam imam rajasayo vidu. So it explains that Krishna first spoke this knowledge to Brahma, and then he had to speak it again to Manu, because it deteriorated. And then he had to speak it again to Ikshvaku, the first king of the solar dynasty on the earth, because it had deteriorated. Everything over time deteriorates, just like a person. They start out being a pristine little baby, very cute and plump and rosy, and then they grow up eventually to becoming a teenager and learn how to smoke marijuana and have illicit sex, and then all of a sudden by the time they're 26, 28, they look really old, and then if they keep doing it, by the time they're 30 or 40, they die, right? So when they die, they don't look very plump and nice and rosy. They look really ugly and wrinkled and sick, you see. It's all because of eating junk and taking in poisonous substances like marijuana and coffee and tea and all these things. The British did a real job on India. They taught the Indians how to drink tea. Tea is a poison. That's why there's an epidemic of high blood pressure in India and cardiac problems and diabetes. It's all caused by that afternoon tea with white flour or Maida flour cookies. They drink it in the morning, they drink it in the afternoon, and they drink it in the late afternoon, and they drink it at night, right? But originally, they didn't drink coffee or tea. They drank lassi, you see. But now lassi has been forgotten, and it's all tea. And this one very saintly person once stayed in my house, and he said, Prabhu, he said, please do not criticize me. I said, why would I criticize you? You're pure Dvaita. He said, yeah, I know. He said, but I have some foibles. I must have some tea every day. I said, okay, I'm not going to say anything. You can cook the tea. I mean, I didn't drink tea because we're not allowed to drink tea or coffee, right? And this guy, he was a big guru, but he had this bad habit, right? Because he was Indian, born in India, and poisoned by the British. You know, British ruined the whole educational system in India, which is still ruined, and they ruined the health of the people by introducing tea. They started the first slaughterhouses. Now there's over 30,000 slaughterhouses in India, and introduced meat eating to the Hindus. You cannot be a Hindu if you eat meat. You can claim to be a Hindu, but you're not a Hindu if you eat meat, because it's forbidden. It's very strictly forbidden by the Vedas. Anyway, well, who cares about the Vedas? People care about, Microsoft certified, first level, second level, third level, fourth level. That's what they spend their money on now. They buy books about Microsoft certification or JavaScript this or plus this thing or that thing. So anyway, and then Prabhupada says, in the Bhagavad Gita, the truth is confirmed in the 4th chapter, verse number 2. And the perfect system of learning is to receive it, or this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, from authority. The very same system is accepted universally as truth, but only the false arguer speaks against it. For example, modern spacecraft fly in the sky, and when scientists say that they travel to the other side of the moon, men believe these stories blindly because they have accepted the modern scientists as authorities. The authorities speak and the people in general believe them. But in the case of Vedic truths, they have been taught not to believe. This is what the British did in India. They taught the Indian people not to believe in the Vedas and to believe in the so-called Bible or the books about Marxism or books about how to increase your sex life. That's what they did, and they ruined the whole educational system in India. It started in 1825 with Lord Macaulay. Anyway, the authorities speak and the people in general believe them. But in the case of Vedic truths, they've been taught not to believe. Even if they accept them, they give a different interpretation, like the Mayavadi philosophers. And 96%, maybe 98% of all the gurus in India are Mayavadis. They don't believe Vaikuntha exists. They don't believe Goloka exists. They don't believe that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They believe that the Brahma Jyoti, which is the effulgence from Krishna's body, they believe that that's the ultimate destination. There's no devotional service in the Brahma Jyoti. There's no individual existence in the Brahma Jyoti. You have to deny your individuality to merge into it. The whole thing is nonsense. But yet, the majority of the gurus in India believe this nonsense. Sikhism believes this nonsense. Jainism believes this nonsense. Right? And amongst the Vaishnavas, there are even Vaishnavas that are tempted by this nonsense also. In fact, in many of the Sanskrit universities that still exist, most of the teachers are Mayavadis. Mayavadi means a person who believes something that's not true. Right? Okay, so, but in the case of Vedic truths, they have been taught not to believe. Even if they accept them, they give a different interpretation. Each and every man wants a direct perception of Vedic knowledge, but foolishly they deny it. This means that the misguided man can believe one authority, the scientist, but will reject the authority of the Vedas. The result is that people have degenerated. So this is what's being taught to your kids today in every one of the schools they go to, right up to PhD. They're taught not to believe in the Vedic literature and to believe the nonsense. We come from monkeys, and everything started with a big bang, and there's gender neutrality, and there's critical race theory now that America is an evil country. It was started by evil white men, and the white man is all white people are evil. Only the brown people are good, and so forth. So all this nonsense is being taught today to your kids, and you let it happen. But actually, you should never let it happen, because it's a sin to lose your faith in Krishna and Krishna consciousness, or Vedic tradition. So then also in the first canto, 11th chapter, 38th verse, is a very interesting point that I touched on yesterday, but I want to develop it now and then we'll stop. 1:11:38. And 1:11:38 says, this is the divinity of the personality of Godhead. He is not affected by the qualities of material nature, even though he is in contact with them. Similarly, the devotees who have taken shelter of the Lord do not become influenced by the material qualities. So, in the purport, it's a very interesting point that's made. And Prabhupada writes, he says, Such Mahabhagavatas, or first-grade devotees, although moving amongst men, are not contaminated by honor or insult, hunger or satisfaction, sleep or wakefulness, which are all resultant actions of the three modes of material nature. Yes, so when you're affected by these dualities of material nature, that's a symptom that the modes of material nature are controlling you, and you're not in control of your activities. You're being forced to do things. Right before that, he says, even Lord Krishna's learned devotees are not affected by the influence of the material modes. The great 6 Goswamis of Vrindavana all came from greatly rich and aristocratic families, but when they adopted the life of mendicants at Vrindavana, superficially they appeared to be in wretched conditions of life, but factually they were the richest of all in spiritual values. Well, if we look at the second canto, 4th chapter, 20th verse, this is something I touched on yesterday, but I want to make a strong point about it today. In that verse, it says, "May Lord Sri Krishna, who is the worshipable Lord of all devotees, the protector and glory of all the kings like Andaka and Vrishni of the Yadu dynasty, the husband of all goddesses of fortune, the director of all sacrifices and therefore the leader of all living entities, the controller of all intelligence, the proprietor of all planets, spiritual and material, and the supreme incarnation on the earth, the supreme all in all, be merciful upon me." So in the purport, Prabhupada says something that is very, very interesting. It's a long purport. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to read one little part of it. And it says that we have information from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verses 10 and 11, that Lord Brahma, after giving rebirth to the conditioned souls within the universe, instructed them to perform sacrifices and to lead a prosperous life. With such sacrificial performances, the conditioned souls will never be in difficulty in keeping body and soul together. Ultimately, they can purify their existence. They will find natural promotion into spiritual existence, the real identity of the living being. Well, it talks about by performing these Vedic sacrifices, or yagyas, one will have a prosperous life. Well, this has been misinterpreted by modern Christians. Not that they read the Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, but they have come up with a theory called prosperity theology. Prosperity theology is being preached by this guy named Austin and other big evangelists that have these big churches with like 5 or 15 or 20,000 people that come every Sunday. And they teach from the Bible, and they came up with this theory called prosperity theology, which means God wants you to be rich. And how you become rich? You tithe the church. You have to give money to the church, a specific amount. Usually they ask for 10% of all your income, not your profit, but your income. And they say if you do this, and you have faith in the pastor, and you always think of doing good deeds, you'll be rich. The only one who gets rich is the pastor. The others think they're getting rich. Right? But actually the minister or the pastor is preaching this theology, that the prosperity theology is getting rich. Well, they have what you call bastardized this theory, this idea of prosperity. The original prosperity theology was given by Lord Brahma. He said in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it says, in the beginning of time, Lord Brahma sent forth demigods and generations of men and gave them sacrifices to perform for Vishnu. The performance of such sacrifices offered to Vishnu will guarantee that you will have as easy and prosperous life. In other words, all your material needs will be met easily. Of course, as long as you downsize them to the bare necessities. Not that you live like high on the hog, as they say in English, eating all kinds of nonsense, doing all kinds of nonsense, and never being satisfied with sense gratification and wanting more and more and more money. No, you have to downsize to simple living, high thinking. Then all your basic needs will be provided by performing yagyas, and it should be for Vishnu, not for the devatas, but to Lord Vishnu. If you please Lord Vishnu, all the devatas are pleased. But in the age of Kali, the age we're in now, the only yagya that can be performed successfully is Sankirtan yagya, chanting of the holy names in public or in private. So this prosperity theology has been perverted by the Christians, and the idea is you'll be a fat cat, as they say in English. You'll have plenty of money, you'll smoke cigars, you'll drive in a big Tesla or Mercedes, and you'll have a yacht, and the checks will come in every month, and you'll be enjoying, women or men or whatever, and God wants you to be like that. So all these big evangelists, they get rich by preaching this prosperity theory. That's exactly what they do. They have girlfriends, even though they're married. They have yachts, they have Teslas and big cars and gold Rolex watches and gold chains, and they live high on the hog, or like fat cats. Right? Same thing in India. You have these Brahmins. They have gold chains. They're fat. They drive BMWs. It's all a bunch of nonsense. Okay? But the Goswamis, the direct disciples of Lord Chaitanya, they were wealthy before they became devotees, but they gave it all up to become mendicants and to preach Krishna consciousness and establish it in a solid foundation. And their wealth was spiritual wealth. Now, spiritual wealth is eternal. Material wealth is not eternal. So what is the real wealth? The real wealth is Janma Karma Chame Divyam Ivam Yoveti Tatvata Tyakpateham Punarjanma Naitimam Eti Sarjanam. It's 4th chapter, 9th verse, which says that anyone who knows is knowledgeable about Krishna's appearance and transcendental pastimes and activities does not take birth again after death, but goes back to Godhead. So, going back to Godhead is the real wealth. That solves all your problems. You no longer have a material body. You have your spiritual body, which is a body also, but it's not made of matter. It's made of Satchitananda Vigraha, of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. And you can engage in all kinds of activities in the spiritual world without old age, disease, and death, with time being your supporter rather than your destroyer, and in the company of Krishna and his transcendental devotees. So that is the real solution to all problems of life. This is what should be taught to our children. This is what we should believe and follow. Simple living, high thinking. Reducing our material needs to a minimum and increasing our spiritual activity to a maximum. Whereas material life is you increase your material activities and entanglement to a maximum and diminish your spiritual activities to almost nothing or nothing. You see. That's what material life is. And then when you die, you take birth again and start all over as a cockroach or a microbe or an amoeba, and have to go through all the different species, come back again after millions and millions of years as a human being, but no telling what's going to happen. Because if you go to the modern schools, you'll become that cockroach again in the next life. You see. It's all due to the educational system that's been destroyed by the demons. Okay, so this real prosperity theory is spiritual prosperity. not this material prosperity as the Christians are teaching. And that spiritual prosperity is eternal. It cannot be destroyed. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? No questions and no answers. So now we'll have Aarti. Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala
हरना करी हो माने आशा श्री गुरु चराने रति से उत्तम गति से उत्तम हे प्रसादे पूरे सर्वाशा चक्षुदान दिल जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते वेदे गाय जहर चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनर बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनर बंधु लोकना लोकेरा जीवाना आहा प्रभु करो दया देह मोरे पद छाया 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 एबे दास गुशुक त्रिभुवाना श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावाना गुरुदेव लोयल शराना प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नित्य गौरा हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौरा हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौरा हरि बोल
Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Bhagavan ki jai. Maharaj, his divine grace, Bhakti Maharaj ki Prabhupada, not the Bhakti Vaishnava, Acharya Srivadasa. Thanks for the folks who take from the Prabhupada. See, Radha Krishna Guru is not coming from the Radha Krishna Guru. He's in Yavadan, Jagannath Puridan, Devi people, Gangamaya people, Hanuman people, the real Bhakti people, Tagore the only way by which we can attain the true devotion of service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great honor. By his grace one can cross the ocean of pure suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. I only wish to have my conscience purified by the words emanating from his lips. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth and birth. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master, the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavan Ki Jai.